Welcome to Schweitzer Drive, a podcast where we explore what goes on between the generation of electricity and the light switch. Join Dave Whitehead as he interviews the entrepreneurs, innovators, and experts who are inventing the future of electric power.
Hi, I'm Dave Whitehead, host of Schweitzer Drive. Information technology pioneer Ted Nelson once said, "Making things easy is hard." This is a great quote for today's episode because we're talking about user experience, or what's referred to as UX. My guest is UX expert Bryan Foutch. Bryan joined Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories as a software engineer in 2010 after graduating from the University of Idaho with degrees in computer science and virtual technology and design. Over the next few years, he began building the SEL user experience methodology and development group. Today, Bryan leads a team of UX designers and researchers who provide input and insight into the development of SEL software products. The group's efforts are focused on developing solutions of world-class utility, efficiency, effectiveness, safety, and ease of use. Hi, Bryan. Thanks for taking the time to explore this topic. Let's jump right in.
All right. Cool, Dave. Thanks.
I've been looking forward to this one, right? Because it's everything, whether we think about it or not, there is some kind of user experience that goes along with how we interact with technology, from your cars to your iPhones to your TV sets. And I can tell you, sometimes it can be a pretty dang frustrating experience, right? How do I get from point A to point B? And, if I'm frustrated, just think about my poor mom who, doesn't design stuff, right? And,
yeah.
We always make the joke, why is the LEDs or the time on your VCR continue to flash in your parents' house? And I'm sure it has to do with user experience. But maybe we step back a second and kind of, discuss or describe what is user experience, especially coming from somebody that's skilled in the art of what it is.
Well, first off, thanks for having me on the podcast, Dave. This is awesome, and very passionate about talking about UX, obviously, and UX, or user experience as it's known. That's more of a modern name for the discipline. Human factors and ergonomics is probably the earlier name for it, and it's a discipline within human psychology, and it was developed. I think it found heavy use maybe in the 40s and the 50s in the military. And imagine you had pilots. It found a lot of use in cockpit design. So you'd have these highly trained pilots jumping from helicopter model A to helicopter model B, and in one you'd be using a joystick, pushing forward to go up, pulling back to go down. In another one you'd have maybe a foot pedal and maybe something you're pulling down from the ceiling, and your dials would be all over the place. And so you'd have these expert folks that would have to reorient and retrain every time they move to a different interface. And when you're in the heat of battle and you're having to make split decisions, you don't want to be trying to figure out how to operate your craft. And so that created this strong need for, standardization, customization, understanding human limitations, what we're really good at, or what we're really good at doing, what we're not so good at doing. And human factors was kind of born and kind of gained popularity.
We're talking about UX, but, a handful of years ago, I can always remember it was UI/UX. What in UI was the user interface? Is the UI been absorbed into the UX, or what happened to UI?
No, UI is still there. There's always the argument or the conversation of form versus function. The aesthetic and the design versus the functionality that it's providing. And UX is definitely concerned with both. But there's a stronger emphasis on the function than the form, especially in utility-based applications. So maybe in entertainment applications, form might be more important, which might be the aesthetic. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, if you get an application that looks great, it's just blows it out of the water and it's amazing, and then after 5 minutes of fiddling around, you realize it doesn't do anything useful, you're going to toss it out. So that's where kind of the form maybe shined, but the function wasn't there. But really, human factors and ergonomics, or UX, focuses on the utility of the product and the efficiency, the safety, the learnability. These are all more functional concepts. So better, I think, to have an app that functions phenomenally well. I mean, if you have to pick and choose, I would pick function over form. But at Schweitzer, we definitely focus on both.
Excellent. Well, let's get into that then. Let's go down this path of, will you walk us through the UX process? What does it take to build a system or an interface, right, that is truly intuitive and easy for somebody to use just walking up to it for the first time? Yeah,
sure. So UX, it's definitely subjective. There's a lot of room. We're doing a ton of invention, and so it can go into a lot of very interesting, innovative spaces, but it's also very repeatable. And that's what I love about it. There's a very strong process behind UX, even though it has, heavy invention and design behind it. So 3 main, subcategories of UX emerge, or user experience. There's research, there's design, and then there's validation. And actually, if you look at the folks that practice user experience, the professionals, there's kind of a split. You have UX researchers that typically get degrees in psychology, cognitive behavioral psychology, research methods, things like that, more the human factors and ergonomics track. And then you have a lot of folks that get degrees in design, human-computer interaction. And so you see this split in kind of the research and understanding the problem domain, and then you see the designers who come in and build the solutions. But fundamentally, you have to begin with research. You have to understand the context around the problem you're trying to solve, how people are doing it today. If you can flesh out this amazing context of just what is, and also as you're doing that, you understand pain points, you understand workarounds where people have basically taken your product and said, "Nah, I don't like what you've done here. I'm going to build my own, Excel tool or my own Python tool." This provides great insight into where the problems or where the products are falling down. So we try to develop a very deep knowledge of how things are done today. We'll model workflows. We'll do a lot of interviewing. We'll do competitive analysis. We'll work with product managers and product champions to develop this knowledge base. And once we have that all modeled out, we have this platform for which to kind of look at the problem domain and the things people are trying to do and the workflows they're using. It's kind of interesting that the most important thing I think to really understand when you're trying to do research is not necessarily like the workflows are important, but it's the constraints around what they're trying to do, what their goal is, and what are the constraints, because the constraints are what's determining that workflow. So
how do you, I've often thought about this, right? I've had the opportunity to design a lot of products, right? Sure. And one might say, okay, whoever's doing that design, whether it's me or somebody else, is the domain expert, right? We've thought out how what an event report is going to look like, because, this is the information we want to see. And then you have the folks from the UX side, right? The psychology major or something like that. How do you span that gap between the domain expert, right, that really understands the intricacies of what the device is needs to do, and then having a psychology major come and tell you how it should work? And there's this divide, right? And maybe it's a little bit of ego on the designer side, right? Of course it should look this way, right? That's the way I envisioned it. And then you take it to market and you come to find out it's like it is really, really hard to use.
That last thing you said really highlights the importance of having a UX team. And I want to answer that other question about how do you bridge between a psychologist and a domain expert.
Yeah.
But it's really, it's not very efficient to figure out you've built the wrong product once you've released it to the market. I mean, you've invested millions of dollars, time, you have your reputation at stake. That's not when you want to learn that you didn't understand the use cases. And so we work with developers to actually build stuff, but really the nuts and bolts of UX happens before that. Think of us as like, we're a laboratory. We're running experiments, we're researching, we're designing, and then we're validating, and then we're going back to the drawing board. And it's one person doing that, or one or two, rather than a whole development team. And so if we can iterate and continuously validate, 10 times, it's kind of like, Edison finding 1,000 ways of how not to build a light bulb. We want to do that with the design and have it all figured out before anyone makes a product, so that no one has to see the, iteration 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5. And so it's all about being super cheap, low risk, working out the kinks before you ever hand it over to the developers. It's kind of like we don't build a house without having an architect really draft out the design for us. I want to come back to you asked about, how a domain expert and a psychologist, how they work together when constructing or when developing new products, and how UX kind of fits in. And this is a challenge, especially in an industry as complex as ours. In UX, you have to understand the domain, because you have to be able to invent, you have to be able to really understand the pain points. But that's also, why we do so much research up front. And the best case situation, which we do a lot here, is when we're working with that domain expert and they're helping to train us, we're researching together. And so the UX professionals are becoming onboarded, and they don't ever become maybe as expert as your product manager or your product champions, but they get pretty good. And they get to the point to where they can innovate alongside everybody else and help those user experience principles and solutions get integrated with our products.
Hey, what's better than in a product development process, right? Typically, we've done it where you build it from the ground up, right? Get the hardware in, right? The relay protection algorithms. And then we come back about, well, how do I want to set that element, or how many inputs should it be, or
Sure.
what can I do, right? And kind of the user interface might be one of the last things we think about, right? Because it needs to be a relay before I need to worry about how do I configure it. And then I've seen other processes where it's like, man, do the user interface first, right? What do we need to do? And then we'll build everything below it. So kind of a top-down approach. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, certainly if the focus is building a product that users are going to interface with, it's very risky to not have a strong UX process up front. Again, back to the whole, if you're going to get it wrong, Frank Lloyd Wright said it's better to use an eraser on the drawing board than a sledgehammer on the construction site. So, we're an eraser on the drawing board, in what we do. And so it's an order of magnitude cheaper. As far as building products that users don't necessarily interface with, that doesn't really require UX. But yeah, in our situation, we oftentimes have both. We have kind of these fundamental protection algorithms that happen automatically. Users don't, they're not really telling the system how to work. They're just being informed after the fact. But users do have to respond to that. And so I think it's definitely important that they're at least co-aligned, kind of both happening at the same time. You don't want the UI to be kind of the last thing that you're thinking about.
Yeah, we've had discussions before. It's these days, a user may never even see a relay or one of our physical products. Rather, their only interaction with that product is through the software that we create to configure and set the device or analyze events that come out of it. It's really, our history is as a hardware company, but you start thinking about how do you collect all the information, how do you analyze it, how do you configure devices, and all of that goes through the user interface.
In the 90s, Don Norman, he's a big player in UX. He worked for IBM, and he coined UX, and it's synonymous with human factors in engineering. And it was a lot more easy for, I think, it was good for marketing. It's a lot easier for the common person to understand what the point is. But if we think about the fact that we started in the 80s, computers and interfaces were 80s and 90s.
Yeah, command line.
Yeah, you had command line back then. So there wasn't a lot of focus on it, but it started to get really important in the 2000s and later. And obviously it's extremely relevant today. And you have customers, that have that sentiment. It's like, I interface with your software, not with your hardware, but the hardware is the thing that actually performs the critical function, right?
Mm-hmm. We've been talking about UX, and this is Schweitzer Drive. What does UX have to do with keeping the lights on?
The power system has gotten very complex, and that's a good thing, right? We're advancing technologically, but one of the challenges of that is now a utility might own thousands of our products and other products from other vendors to help accomplish, reliable energy. And so how do you keep track of all that? How do you manually maintain and go out and collect information from all these devices? It becomes virtually impossible. And so UX has kind of helped drive features and interest into automation, different types of capabilities that help the user rather than, being in a truck and driving out to substations left and right, more sit at their computer and remotely assess and analyze the information. And now it's even get alerted through an email rather than having to go out and look to see if something has happened or waiting for customers to call and say the power's out. So we can also help prevent faults from happening. So automated systems are really important as we think about how the power system is scaling as far as the complexity. We have lots of cases where we have operators who are interfacing with the system. We have engineers that are designing the power system, and it's really important that we help those engineers, design it well. We want to make sure we're eliminating any type of human error which may cause a trip to happen, people to lose power, or we want to make sure an operator who's looking at the system or someone who's out working on the system, they don't accidentally trip the wrong breaker. So again, alluding back to situational awareness, it's just really important that we help users have a strong mental model of the system they're working in, are able to accurately operate it without making mistakes, because mistakes here can be very costly. I remember doing an interview and an engineer or a relay technician saying, yeah, if you turn off the CEO's power, you've basically lost your job. And he was just kidding. But what he was just getting at was just the criticality of what we do and the impact of what we do and what mistakes can have on our customers' lives. Now, our customers are not the end user per se, because we're a business to business company. And maybe just stepping out and being more generic. So we support engineers and utilities, folks that are making electric power or building systems that are safe and reliable and economic. If you think about the problems they're trying to solve, how do I minimize the reduction of faults? How do I find faults? How do I have awareness of my system, so that I can send responders out to quickly resolve issues? Pretty much every aspect that we're focused on is about the user's experience with electric power. How can we not disrupt their daily life and their use of this fundamental resource to do just basically everything they do? You think about the infrastructure we're built on top of. And so maybe more specifically, there's things like if I'm building an HMI or a screen that helps an operator understand the state of the power system in their city. So there's some rules around design like situational awareness and kind of minimizing the visual clutter around the display. So if you remember the first iPhone came out, everything was like 3D and glossy and amazing. And like you'd open up the library and it'd be a bookshelf and there'd be books on it. That was really cool, as we were seeing, like, here's these real world metaphors in a digital environment, and everyone loved it until you tried to kind of start to use these applications and realize the information that was important was getting lost in this circus of, amazing 3D, they call it skeuomorphism, the skeuomorphic design. And so you saw this revolution move into this flat design to where the interface kind of faded into the background so that the most important information that needed to be salient would pop forward. And so UX really fueled and helped operators kind of look at these screens, and now the only thing that matters is what's flashing, and everything else is kind of grayed out and subdued, so they can maintain really kind of focused situational awareness. They can respond quickly. We were in an operator room one time, and one of the operators said being an operator is like, what was it? It was hours of boredom mixed with minutes of sheer chaos or sheer terror.
I could see that. What are some examples of UX in action right now?
So obviously we're very familiar. I made the reference to our phones. I think Apple and Android really they made UX table stakes for products. And so every day when you're interfacing with your phone, everyone is interfacing with kind of a war to have the best user experience out there. And so the bar has been set pretty high. And you look at a lot of what, Elon Musk is doing. You look at, his space shuttle. It's just a giant screen with his astronauts, sitting in there. It's not like these things used to be like the quintessential example of why UX was important, because they would just have thousands of dials and controls, and you'd have these astronauts just cramped in there with manuals floating around and everything. And now
Have you seen there's a picture, I forgot where it's got three sets of pictures. The first one is one of the Apollo capsules, with all the switches and fuses, and then they show the space shuttle, and then they show whatever Elon's is, the Falcon or whatever, right? And it's three large displays, right? And the evolution of the user interface for the astronauts. It's really interesting,
Very
really
cool.
telling. Yeah.
Yeah. And you I think you see that also in the Teslas themselves, the sleek design, the interface. So,
Hey, where does that go too far though? Right. It is, I forgot, I was in a friend's car, and to turn on the air conditioning took about they had a really big display in the center of their dashboard, and took about 3 different screens to finally get to the fan setting so you could turn it up or turn it down. And, I am of the opinion right now where I buy all my cars, like the temperature settings all have to be manual switches that are right there on so I don't have to go through seven different screens to turn on my air conditioner, right? So maybe UX can go a little bit too far when we have this all glass car and you got to navigate through a whole bunch of stuff, right? That's my frustration with UX at times.
It's like a new dimension of complexity. It's going the opposite way too far.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when maybe they said, hey, we have self-driving technology, so it's okay if our driver is distracted from looking out the cockpit. But usually that's a big kind of no. You don't want to distract the user away from that. And what's great about hand controls, like a knob, is there's a tactile aspect to it. You can actually just reach over there and feel it and find it, and you don't have to actually divert your attention. And as we move more towards digital interfaces, we're adding a different type of cognitive complexity that's interfering with primary tasks. Better to do like heads-up display or things that can keep your eyes still on the road or on what you're doing.
How does now I'm just thinking about this. How does say the audio component work in? It's like Siri, set the temperature to 72 degrees,
sure.
right? And then I don't have to touch anything or do anything. We've got some smart home features, right? And I can walk in. It's like, Siri, turn the lights on in the kitchen, right? And
Siri, set my overcurrent element to Yeah, that's awesome, because now we're adding a new kind of interface that we've not had access to before. I mean, unless you had someone you could actually physically talk to. So that's allowing us to use a different channel, so our voice and audio, versus distracting from our visual channel, which is typically what we kind of use for most of our operation or execution. So it's great when we can, in human factors, we can kind of find a different channel to what's the word, kind of chop up our workload and start to kind of distribute that out.
Well, we're kind of headed down the road with this next question already. Is what is the horizon for UX? Where do we end up? And in particular, related to the power industry, what do you see? Well,
so obviously, artificial intelligence is a big thing on everyone's mind right now, especially the artists out there. I connect with a lot of the graphic designers and such. I have a bunch of friends who are pretty nervous about possibly being replaced. But just with
my brother's a lawyer. What's going to happen to him?
A computer is going to be able to make a much better argument than a human at some point, and provide much better probable cause maybe. I think that what's kind of interesting about UX is, like, today I go and I research. Sorry, and you asked about the power system, and I'm more focusing on UX. But
okay.
So right now I go and I have to kind of set up meetings with humans and have these interactions, which are fantastic. I love doing job shadowing. Just learning what they do, observing what they do, having these rich conversations where they can share their needs and wants. But eventually, in addition to that, I can ask, Chat GPT version 19.5 or whatever, comes out in 10 years or maybe sooner, maybe it's next year. Hey, can you research the entire known, historical database around this problem and let me know what the main issues are regarding it? Or, hey, I've got this wireframe. Can you look at this and toss out some design options for me? I think these things will start to integrate, and we can start to use AI to help research topics, to help vet designs, at least to get us started. I don't think you can ever replace the human's creativity, ingenuity, and things like that. But AI will be a very interesting piece to the future of UX.
I think there's a play for both, right? The human and I just look at let's talk about customer service, right? There's a bunch of different ways. One of our favorite ways, right, is to actually have a human pick up a phone if you have a question. The other day, though, at my house, I had to replace the cable boxes. I think there was new hardware that needed to be upgraded, and part of the process is you have to get your cable boxes registered, and they tell you log into this website, which is, I guess, is a user interface, and the website was down, right? So it's like, crap, I want to watch TV tonight. There was some game I wanted to watch, right? And I can't. The website's down. So what do I do? But there was down at the bottom there was like, hey, contact us. One of those pop up things. So I said, all right, I'll try this, and I pop up one of those little text chat boxes kind of stuff, and it's how can I help you? It's like, well, I'm trying to register my, I type in, I'm trying to register my cable box. Oh, okay. Can you tell me what the numbers are, right? And this is going on for about 3 or 4 minutes, and the light bulb goes off in my head. It's like, I am not talking to a human, right? This is a machine, and it was a wonderful experience, right? It took care of it in about 5 minutes. All of a sudden, all my boxes are now turned on, and I'm watching the game. So I think there's a place for it. You call us up. It's like, oh, what cable should I be using to connect RTAC and 411L or T401, right? It's a pretty common question. You don't need a human to do it all the time. And so I think there's going to be benefit. Now, there could be some really difficult nuances, where you have to put a lot of different things together and have some expertise and want a good explanation. I bet there's still a place for a human to do that, though. ChatGPT does a pretty good job of answering a lot of questions. I've seen some pretty interesting things. I also learned about, what is it? There's like psychosis or something. What do they call it when ChatGPT gives you a really bad, wrong answer?
Oh, shoot. I'm not sure.
There's a funny name for it. It's like it's a psychology term too. It's like it's where it loses its mind, right? So it's
I like psychosis. We'll stick with that.
That's not the right name, but it's something like that.
I think you hit on a good point. Humans have things they're excellent at, and human factors and ergonomics. It started with really a study of humanity and asked, what are we really good at? What are we not so good at? We're not awesome at vigilance. You kind of hear some stories about people up in the towers of the airports of flight controller or
air traffic controller.
Air traffic controller, thank you. And every once in a while falling asleep. We're not awesome at that stuff, and we're not. We have a certain reach that we have physically, and there were early manufacturing equipment would have like the emergency shutoff switch to a shear or something really dangerous, like 10 feet away from the actual chute that the user was feeding stuff into. And so human factors and ergonomics really started with understanding, what are humans excellent at? What are we not? What are our limitations? And how can we design the world around them? I love that the electrician kind of standard. I was rewiring my house, and I just noticed that you're supposed to place an outlet 6 feet from your door and then every 12 feet. And I was asking my dad, who's an electrical engineer, I was like, why is that? And he's like, well, most cords are 6 feet long. And so, when you buy something, you want to make sure you can have you can put something anywhere in your room. And I thought, man, what a cool kind of human focused idea, and so as far as AI and coming in to kind of help answer our questions, maybe we find that a lot of jobs that we're doing today, we're not, there's opportunities for us to do things that have more dignity of work associated with them, or things that are more focused on creativity, ingenuity, connection, empathy, things that humans are excellent at. I don't know, but
I'm no historian by any means, but I think, we talk about right now we're in, Industry 4.0. Industry 1 was, right, we got some mechanization and some steam. Then we got electricity was 2. Then we got some computation that was 3, computers and stuff. And now we're at this, I'll call it 4, where we have the interconnectivity, the communication, right? And in each one of these transition periods, the idea is like, this is going to put millions of people out of work. Well, no, it really didn't put millions of people out of work. Rather, we found better, different ways to use their talents, as opposed to using their backs. They got to use their brain. So while I think, AI could be thought of as a threat, I think it's just going to be one of these other inflection points or transition points in the evolution of how we, live our lives and run our businesses.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you. I'm pretty optimistic about it, actually. I think I think there's some really cool stuff on the
Or
horizon.
the Terminator movies are going to come
That
true.
could-
One of the two.
that could
I don't
also
know.
happen.
It could go either way, I guess, right? We'll figure it out in a few years.
I hold to optimism because, the alternative is pretty rough.
Well, Bryan, thanks very much for talking about UX and a little bit of UI. It's always an interesting topic, the blending of technology and art and science. It's an interesting topic, and it's never going to go away. So you got a long career ahead of you, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank goodness.
All righty. Thanks very much. Appreciate the time.
All right. See ya. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you for stopping by Schweitzer Drive. Join us again as we learn about, explore, and celebrate electric power. For more information about the show, please visit selinc.com/Schweitzer Drive.